The Kremlin is more than just a building. Believe it or not, it actually embodies the entire Russian government itself. But have you ever wondered what actually makes it so extraordinary? Could it be Putin's elite squad guarding it, or the secret escape routes running under it? Are you curious to find out? Well, join me as we dive into the 5 most insane security features of the Kremlin that will blow your mind. The Kremlin Arsenal. On number 1, we have the Kremlin Arsenal. And trust me, this place is more than just a fancy armory in the Kremlin. But before we go into the heavy details, let's take a look at the Moscow Kremlin first, that stands proudly atop the Borovitsky Hill and contains this formidable arsenal. It's like a city within Moscow, once home to Russian royalty and now the official crib of the President of Russia. Oh, and fun fact alert, the name Kremlin actually means fortress inside a city. And interestingly enough, it's often used as a metonym for the Russian government. And here's a little nugget of knowledge for you all. Ever heard of Kremlinology? It's the official term for the study of Soviet and Russian politics. Talk about the fortress extending its influence beyond the walls themselves. Now, back in 1156, when the word Kremlin was just a twinkle in Prince Yuri Dolgoruki's eye, he ordered the construction of the first wooden fortress. Fast forward to the 14th century, and that's when Kremlin officially made it into the Russian vocabulary. But the masterpiece we behold today didn't pop up overnight. It's a creation of the late 15th century, born from the dreams of Moscow Prince Ivan the Great. He had this grand vision of a capital that could give Constantinople a run for its money, and he called it the Third Rome. Ivan brought in Italian architects to work their magic, and while most of their handiwork is still standing tall even today. Now, within the Kremlin Moscow, you can find no less than 5 palaces, 4 cathedrals, and the Kremlin Wall with its towers. And topping it all off is the Grand Kremlin Palace, which once housed Russian emperors and is now where the president kicks back. With almost 3 million visitors in 2017, it's safe to say the Moscow Kremlin isn't just a residence, it's a hot tourist spot. But hold on, we're not done yet. Sneak a peek at the northern corner and you'll find the Kremlin Arsenal holding down the fort in this gigantic place. This former armory stands proudly within the Moscow Kremlin grounds in Russia. First constructed in 1736, it has undergone multiple rebuilds. Unlike its counterpart, the Kremlin Armory, which now serves as a museum, the arsenal is still in active military use. Tourists, however, are met with a firm off-limits sign when it comes to exploring this intriguing structure. Now the arsenal looks like a massive 2-story elongated trapezoid. Back in the Middle Ages, this spot wasn't hosting cannons and military glory. It was instead full of granaries, but as fate would have it, they went up in flames in the late 17th century. Then Peter the Great called upon a dream team of Russian and German architects to create the Kremlin Arsenal. The construction kicked off in 1702, aiming to be Moscow's heavyweight in terms of buildings. Unfortunately, the Great Northern War with Sweden hit a pause on the construction due to some financial hiccups. Then later on, it finally hit the finish line in 1736, under the watchful eye of Field Marshal Burkhard Christoph von Munich. But hey, the dramatic story of the Kremlin Arsenal still doesn't end there. A fire in 1737 turned the arsenal into a charred mess again, and it took a makeover from 1786 to 1796 to get it back in the architectural game. Then fast forward to Napoleon's grand entrance, and as the French troops made their dramatic exit from Moscow in 1812, they left a parting gift, blowing up the central chunk of the arsenal. Talk about an explosive exit. Anyway, restoration efforts came to the rescue between 1814 and 1828, giving the arsenal a neoclassical facelift. It was transformed into a museum celebrating Russia's triumph over Napoleon. While the arsenal building accommodates the barracks of the presidential regiment, it's important to note that this doesn't transform the Kremlin into a residential space. Unlike typical residential areas for officials or wealthy citizens, the fortress territory lacks such classic living quarters. The presidential regiment's presence adds a military touch, but it's far from being a residential haven within the Kremlin walls. So no fancy penthouses or backyard barbecues within these fortress walls, guys. And here's the kicker, it's a no-go zone for tourists. Yes, sorry, you can't stroll in and admire the arsenal's security swagger. In short, it's a fortress within a fortress, standing guard with a history as intriguing as the treasures it once housed. Now let's clear the air about the Kremlin Arsenal. I'm talking about it's a whole different ball game from the Kremlin Armory Chamber you've probably heard about. The Armory Chamber started as a basic weapons storage in 1547, but it didn't stop there. By 1726, it had a makeover and became the Armory and Workshop Chamber, merging with the stable treasury, workshop and the state court. Fast forward to 1844 to 1851, it became a new museum building spruced up with carved white stone columns. Now, in the Soviet era, the Armory became a safe haven for valuables from private collections and artifacts rescued from churches and monasteries. In 1924, it switched gears and became the Museum of Applied Arts. World War II forced a relocation to the the Urals from 1941 to 1945. By 1960, it had joined forces with the state museums of the Moscow Kremlin. But here's the real gem. The Diamond Fund exhibition has also displayed its precious stuff in the Armory Chamber since 1967. And with over 4,000 monuments of applied art, this place is a treasure trove. And the crowning glory? It displays the oldest state regalia, the church hierarch's vestments, royal bling, handmade silver, and gold wonders from Eastern, Russian, and European maestros, ceremonial horse trappings, the list goes on. And there you have it, the Kremlin arsenal, where history meets security. But hold on, because we're not done unlocking the Kremlin's secrets. Next up, we're diving into the world of Putin's personal army. Putin's guards. Vladimir Putin, the man himself, takes security to a whole new level. Let's start with the basics. Bulletproof briefcases and high-powered pistols are just the tip of the iceberg. Now the man's been in power since 2000, so he's got this security thing down to an art. Former KGB agent turned president, he's got a knack for avoiding not just political bullets, but literal ones too. There's even talk of him having his own private army, ready to swoop in like the Avengers at the hint of trouble. I guess when you're Vladimir Putin, a regular security detail just won't cut it. As a matter of fact, Putin's security has some serious tasks on their plate. From checking and securing every hotel room to tasting every diplomatic dish, they make sure the man himself stays untouched by harm. Armored cars? Check. Drones? Double check. But wait, there's more. He's even got a psychological security unit that can sniff out ill intentions in a crowd. It's like having mind-reading bodyguards. Moving on, let's dive into these men in black who are tasked with protecting the man who is the Kremlin itself. First up in Putin's collection of guards is the Rosgvardia, or as it's better known, the National Guard of the Russian Federation. And let me get one thing straight. These guys are not your average security detail. It's a powerhouse with a mission as serious as its name suggests. Basically, think of the National Guard as the internal military muscle of Russia, and it reports directly to the big boss himself, President Vladimir Putin. It brings together Interior Ministry troops, SWAT, Riot Police, the Center for Special Rapid Reaction Force, and even the Interior Ministry Aviation. I mean, seriously, forget parades. It's literally the go-to for everything in internal security, from safeguarding borders to handling emergencies. They've got the whole package, and they're really not shy about flexing their muscles. Interestingly, though, the National Guard stands apart from the Russian armed forces. In 2016, a law signed by Putin set up this distinct federal executive body. According to the official document, their main gig is the protection of public order, combating terrorism and extremism, participation in territorial defense, and the protection of important state facilities and special cargo. But here's the thing, it's not just about guarding the home front. The National Guard can also pack its bags and head for international missions to restore and maintain peace. Now let's fast forward to 2022. There have been many distressed rumors of the National Guard making moves toward the Russia-Ukraine border, and Belarus under the guise of a training exercise. And when Russian forces decided to engage in war with Ukraine in February, the National Guard troops were front and center, marching into Ukrainian territory like they owned the place. And yeah, they were supposedly there for a not-so-friendly welcome to any local dissent. But here's where it gets even juicier. Some folks see the National Guard as Putin's strategic move, streamlining the security system to avoid overlapping responsibilities. On the flip side, there are whispers of it being Putin's ace up the sleeve, a private army to handle any civil unrest or, dare I say, a color revolution, both at home and abroad in friendly regimes. It's the kind of intrigue you'd find in a spy novel. The Altay branch head of the National Guard spilled the beans, revealing that this security powerhouse was Putin's solution to deal with those pesky fifth-column agitators and potential revolutionaries brewing trouble from abroad. In short, the National Guard is Putin's consolidative fist, ensuring stability and social order in the Kremlin and all over Russia. Next up, we have the Kremlin Regiment, or as they're casually known, the Presidential Regiment. This is the cream of the crop, entrusted with the sacred duty of safeguarding the Kremlin. As a special unit under the Russian Federal Protective Service, their mission is crystal clear: keep the Kremlin secure, protect its treasures, and ensure state officials get a good night's sleep. Now, let's turn back the pages of history to understand their role in the Kremlin. When Soviet Union big shots moved from Petrograd to the Moscow Kremlin in 1918, they had the Red Latvian Riflemen as their protectors. But times change, and so do bodyguards. In 1936, a special purpose battalion took the stage, stepping into the shoes of the Red Latvian Riflemen. And then World War II came knocking, and the regiment stepped up its game, defending the Kremlin at home and abroad. Snipers from the Kremlin Regiment were sent to the Western and Volkhov fronts, taking down over 1,200 German soldiers and officers. And by doing so, their bravery earned them the prestigious Order of the Red Banner. Then fast forward to the post-war era, and the regiment had its fair share of rebranding. Names changed, duties evolved, but the core mission remained: to be the fortress within the fortress. In 1993, when the Soviet Union took its final bow, the regiment got a breather from certain guard duties. But don't worry, they were soon back in action. one, protecting the tomb of the unknown soldier and keeping the flame of World War II veterans burning bright. Of course, as they're considered an elite military unit, the Kremlin regiment doesn't just hand out uniforms to anyone. No sir, only the best of the best get the nod for the national duty of guarding government officials and the VIPs of the Kremlin. Another capable squad protecting the Russian president is the notorious Presidential Security Service, SBP. These guys don't just play security, they're literally the invisible shield around the President of Russia and the Prime Minister, along with their families and residences. So what goes down when President Putin steps out of the Kremlin? Well, there's actually a specialized unit in the SBP that takes charge of securing the perimeter during these movements. They plan routes very meticulously, avoiding any potential trouble spots or civil unrest. And when Putin takes the show on the road internationally, things get even trickier for these guards. This unit becomes a well-oiled machine, collaborating with local law enforcement to tackle threats before they even sprout. Escape plans? You betcha. They've got those locked and loaded. Now, it would be remiss of me not to mention the SBP's Psychological Security Department too. These are the brainiacs analyzing intel about threats to the president's life. Think of it as a panel of experts from GRU, FSB and SVR working together to keep the top dog safe. So it's not just muscles that keep the Kremlin safe, it's brains too. In a nutshell, all these guards are always hard at work shielding their president from any potential threats and keeping the Kremlin's secrets safe where they belong. But hold on, because guards are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the Kremlin's security. Now let's take a look at some of the most ingenious escape plans and strategic points that make it a stronghold like no other on this planet. Escape points. Putin's enemies might need a reality check when it comes to his protection. I mean, come on. They're dealing with a man whose personal security is the stuff of legends. Because deep in the Kremlin, Putin has escape routes that make your average hideout look like child's play. We're talking helipads and literal metro systems, the kind of stuff you see in action movies. First up, the helipad. To dodge the chaos caused by those pesky motorcades, Putin decided to greenlight the construction of a helipad right in the heart of the Kremlin. Completed in May 2013, this isn't just any helipad, it's the VIP landing spot for Putin's Mi-8 helicopter. Seriously, forget all about any threats in rush hour traffic, because Putin's soaring above it all. And don't think for a second that he chose the helipad location lightly. Of course not. Careful consideration went into making sure it didn't mess with the Kremlin's architectural vibes. Anyway, this isn't even half of it, because the truth is, Putin takes his escape game to a whole new level. You thought the helipad was impressive? Well, buckle up, because he's got a plan B, and it involves the Moscow Metro. Yes, you heard it right. The very same metro system that millions of regular commuters use. Now, the Moscow Metro isn't just your average underground commute. It's a sprawling network serving Moscow and its neighboring cities. It's been chugging along since 1935, making it the Soviet Union's first underground railway system. But here's where it gets even more interesting. There's a second, deeper metro system lurking beneath the surface, codenamed D6. Why? Well, it's not for your everyday rush hour. It's supposedly designed for the emergency evacuation of key personnel in case of a nuclear attack. Picture a secret underground railway connecting the Kremlin, General Staff HQ, FSB headquarters, the Ministry of Defense, and a bunch of other hush-hush installations, and you'll understand what I mean. It's kinda like a James Bond movie unfolding beneath the streets of Moscow, don't you think? And Putin is smack in the middle of it. Now here's the kicker. The alleged entrances to this secret system exist in civilian buildings like the Russian State Library and Moscow State University. Yep, your typical library or university might have a secret entrance to a Cold War-era escape tunnel. But where's the junction between the secret system and the regular metro? Supposedly, it's lurking behind the Sportivnaya station on the Sokolnicheskaya line. It's like a secret escape hatch reserved for the elite military personnel, and rumor has it, a select few civilians chosen randomly for evacuation. So you better believe it when Putin talks about being prepared for anything. He's not just talking about a well-stocked pantry. He's got a whole underground city waiting to whisk him away if disaster strikes. So now that we've checked off a literal helipad and a metro network, it's time to talk about Putin's notorious armored train that quickly and covertly takes him all over Russia. According to many reports, Putin owns a luxurious 22-car ghost train that's the epitome of opulence and secrecy. But first things first, let's talk about the perks. And let me get one thing straight. This train isn't just for getting from point A to point B. It's a full-on mobile fortress of comfort and safety. We're talking a fully equipped gym, a skincare and massage parlor decked out with anti-aging machines, and a Turkish bath steam room that's probably fancier than most spa resorts. And of course, there are lush bedrooms and ornate dining cars for those gourmet meals that Putin probably loves on the move. And of course, dozens of crew members are on call 24/7, waiting in quarantine to ensure Putin's safety from illness while on board. But that's not all. This train is a whole entertainment hub on wheels, including a movie theater where Putin can catch up on the latest blockbusters while traversing the vast Russian landscapes. Interestingly, this armored train isn't a recent acquisition. It was actually commissioned in 2014, but but its usage saw a spike during the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Now, I must say that this train is practically a moving fortress. Bulletproof doors and windows, heavy armor. Putin travels in style, and safety is the name of the game. Life-saving medical equipment is on standby, just in case. And here's a fun fact. It's not just about avoiding traffic. The train is heavily armored to avoid radar detection. But why the train over a presidential plane, you must be wondering? Well, it's simple. A plane is too exposed. It's on the radar, literally. The train, on the other hand, can move discreetly on the ground. Amateur train spotters in Russia have long suspected its existence, documenting sightings of a train not listed on any timetables or official railway databases. And as we know by now, this particular train is always hauling a car with a distinctive white dome that contains antennas and satellite nodes that are responsible for keeping Putin in the loop about the outside world at all times. In fact, an entire rail line was reportedly built throughout Russia, connecting Putin's private residences to main rail arteries, with secret stations only accessible to his ghost train to keep the president on the move without a trace. So yeah, when you're Vladimir Putin and you've got the weight of a nation on your shoulders, you build helipads and underground escape routes in the Kremlin, because in the game of power, you don't leave anything to chance. The Grand Kremlin Palace. Of course, when exploring the remarkable security features of the Kremlin, the Grand Kremlin Palace demands attention as one of the most fortified places in the country. This huge complex extends beyond the palace itself, featuring significant churches, reception halls, governmental buildings, and more. Now let me just rewind the clock and explore how it really fits into Russia's security and strength. The Grand Kremlin Palace is a significant piece of Russian history. It all began in the 12th century with a wooden fortress constructed by Grand Prince Yuri Dolgoruki in 1147. Over the centuries, the fortress evolved, and in the 16th century, Ivan the Terrible and Boris Godunov added a grand palace. The huge complex was the former royal residence that housed Russian Tsars from the 15th to the 19th century. Fast forward to 1838, during Tsar Nikolai II's reign, when architects Konstantin Ton and Ivan Morozov crafted the neoclassical masterpiece you see today. The Grand Kremlin Palace boasts over 1,000 rooms, including the famous Andrei. The inside is like a mashup of different styles. Think Renaissance meets Byzantine Russian, creating a vibe that's all about elegance, class, and mad craftsmanship skills. Lavish interior decorations, paintings from European royalty, and intricate enamel patterns on walls and windows contribute to its grandeur. And let's not forget the exterior, which is a masterpiece, decorated with ornate stonework, murals, sculptures, and other embellishments that breathe life into its walls. The palace is also a stage for state ceremonies in Alexander Hall, a VIP reception zone for foreign heads of state in the St. George Hall, and the Tsar's chambers where the guests are hosted guests, because of course. Now, history has been both kind and unkind to the palace. In the 1930s, the palace had a glow-down moment when the Alexandrovsky and Andreevsky halls became the assembly hall of the USSR Supreme Soviet, losing their fancy interiors. Sad, right? However, a decision by the president of the Russian Federation in the 1990s saw the restoration of these halls, reclaiming their former glory. So, as of 2023, the Grand Kremlin Palace is where the Russian president apparently lives and hosts official events. The president's inauguration, for instance, happens in the Hall of the Order of St. Andrew. Excursions are possible during breaks from official events, but organizations need to request them from the head of the commandant's office of the Moscow Kremlin. Now, while we're on the topic of the Grand Kremlin Palace, let me remind you guys again of a very important fact. Contrary to popular belief, the Grand Kremlin Palace isn't just a building, it's actually where all the power in the country resides, where all the decisions are made. From president to prime minister, Putin's fingerprints are all over the country's policies, both within the palace borders and on the global stage. He has been the chief architect of Russia's policies, pulling the strings both on the home front and the global stage from the Grand Kremlin Palace. His influence is so immense that when folks casually toss around the term Kremlin, they're not merely talking about some architectural marvel like the one we're talking about. No, in everyday banter, it's a kind of secret code for the Russian government under his watch. Back in the Cold War days, the phrase covered the whole Soviet Union. Fast forward to now, and it's like a spotlight on the executive branch, the domain of President Vladimir Putin. And power in Russia? Well, it all converges in this branch, and spoiler alert, Putin's got the reins. To put it very simply, the Kremlin represents a form of governance that's centralized and has left an indelible mark on Russia's political landscape. So wipe away the notion of the Kremlin Palace being just a physical space. In our modern language, it's a symbol of complete control. But let's dig a little deeper here, literally. Back in 2016, whispers started circulating about Russia giving a modern facelift and adding extra layers to dozens of covert sites in and around the palace in Kremlin. In fact, Moscow also has its own network of deep underground sites, and the Kremlin isn't just above ground. Reports from 2016 hinted at the modernization and expansion of these underground facilities. And what we're talking about here is a gigantic leadership bunker beneath Moscow State University, known as the Ramenki Underground Facility. And trust me, it's not just any bunker. It's intended for the National Command Authority in times of war. And get this, it's reportedly connected to the Kremlin by a VIP subway, the elusive Metro 2. Anyway, we'll get to that later. But the story doesn't end there. This underground subway supposedly extends to at least 2 more bunkers outside Moscow, one near Voronovo and another near Sharapovo. And for those thinking even further afield, there's a pretty enormous underground command center near Kozvinsky as well. In other words, the Grand Kremlin Palace not only stands as the main residence of the President of the Russian Federation, it is also the main hub where many of Putin's secret underground facilities and tunnels converge. Putin's other Kremlins. Both the United States and Russia have invested a pretty penny in creating underground bunkers, a kind of just-in-case insurance policy against the unthinkable, a nuclear war, an apocalypse, and so on. In the US, they've got the Cheyenne Mountain Complex standing tall in Colorado, and let's not forget the Raven Rock Mountain Complex doing its underground thing in Pennsylvania. And Putin is no different in this regard. Now, over in Russia, rumors are always going around about Vladimir Putin having his very own Batcave underneath the Ural mountain range, particularly beneath Mount Yamantau. So what's this mysterious bunker like? Well, let me explain. Mount Yamantau is a mysterious fortress that's heavily buried beneath 3,000 feet of rock, mainly composed of quartz. And it's not your typical mountain. It's a colossal complex, reportedly sprawling across an area as vast as the Washington area inside the Beltway. That's about 400 square miles of hidden intrigue. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. This massive structure is snugly nestled within Mezhgorya, a closed town in Russia, and closed means exclusive, and only the chosen few are allowed to live and work in this secretive haven. So if you want to drop by for a visit, well, good luck, because Russian aircraft have declared a no-fly zone over the mountain, and reaching it on foot is no walk in the park. It's been whispered to be a continuity of government site, a plan B for Russia's top dogs in case of a major crisis. Think of it as Russia's version of the Raven Rock Mountain Complex, the underground lair of the US military. The catch? Russia's been playing the quiet card about it since forever. The construction was a hot topic in 1996, with officials offering a smorgasbord of explanations. It's a mining site, a treasure trove, a giant food storage, a nuclear waste dump, or a swanky bunker for Russia's leaders in case of a nuclear Armageddon. The New York Times even had a field day with the speculations. Anyway, Seth Baum, who is the executive director of the Global Catastrophic Risk Institute, says it's not shocking that Russia might have a mountain lair, just like the US. Tom Davies, an associate professor in geography, also spills the tea on Putin's potential underground sanctuary. He suggests that the Ural Mountains are part of Putin's nuclear real estate, given Russia's historical attachment to the region. In fact, it seems that Russia had set the stage with bunkers and shelters in the Urals during the Cold War and won too, providing a logical choice for Putin's go-to refuge. This period saw the strategic relocation of industries to the east of the Urals during Operation Barbarossa, and according to Davies, the Russian president can tap into a vast network of nuclear bunkers and military facilities dating back to the Cold War. The Ural Mountains likely serve as one such location as a key player in Russia's geopolitical strategy. But hold on, because there's another underground facility that Putin got a lot of shade from a couple of years back. Putin seems to have yet another hidden maze of underground tunnels beneath his Black Sea Palace retreat. And these aren't your run-of-the-mill tunnels. We're talking about a secret network approximately 50 meters below the Gelendzhik Palace's surface. And where do they lead? Straight to a mysterious bunker. First leaked by Business Insider, this complex looks like Putin had the foresight to build this subterranean fortress over a decade ago. Actually, it even predates the whole Crimea annexation saga in 2014. Yeah, you heard that right. While Putin was busy engaging in diplomatic tete-a-tetes with US presidents during the much buzzed-about reset era, behind the scenes he was playing a whole different game. And the truth is undeniable. These tunnels are Putin's insurance policy against potential revolutions or wars. Sneaky, huh? First, let's talk about the $1.3 billion palace, which is a sprawling 190,000 square feet complex perched on a rugged cliff overlooking the Black Sea. To absolutely no one's surprise, the lavish palace boasts all the awesome amenities you can think of, including but not limited to a church, a wine cellar, a casino, and even an ice rink. Talk about living the high life, right? The palace is cocooned from the rest of Russia by 17,000 acres of forest, creating a fortress vibe. Add a special no-fly zone into the mix, and you've got a place that's practically off the grid. Now let's dig into the blueprints of the palace to get a clear picture of Putin's so-called escape point. Back in 2010, Metro-style, a now defunct Russian contractor, dropped detailed maps of the place, laying bare the intricate network of tunnels on their website. These maps, revealing the underground maze, were open for public scrutiny until the curtains closed in 2016. By Putin's orders, of course. According to them, the tunnels are no joke. Two of them, approximately 40 and 60 meters long, create about 6,500 square feet of potential living space. Blast-proof? You betcha. future. Encased in thick concrete, these tunnels are ready for whatever may come. Fresh water? Check. Ventilation? Absolutely. Extensive cables to support VIP occupants for days or weeks? Of course. In the intricate design of this bunker, an elevator shaft links the complex to 2 tunnels. The lower tunnel even features a walkway to the beach along with cable racks, suggesting a setup for bringing electricity, lighting and fiber optic cables to a command post. But what makes this setup even more intriguing is that it's not your typical government-funded bunker. Nope, it's Putin's private investment. It's like he's been playing the long game, preparing for threats and building trapdoors for his shelter or escape. Now let's talk about the last Kremlin beneath Moscow's surface. The Remenki, also known as Remenki 43. In the mid-1970s, the Russians discreetly constructed deep underground bunkers in this hidden district. These bunkers, shrouded in layers of secrecy, hidden entrances, and even an abandoned concrete plant, became the stuff of legends. Now let me just rewind to the 1950s, when Soviet dreams floated the idea of relocating top government and military figures to Remenki. While that grand plan didn't quite unfold, the Soviets pivoted to Plan B, creating a complex network of bunkers, all interconnected and cleverly hidden under the guise of a concrete plant. Fast forward to the mid-1970s, and there you have it. The underground bunkers were born, posing as innocent garages. Declassified documents spill the secrets, revealing bunkers that plunge a staggering 189 meters into the earth. Now, back in 1992, Time magazine spilled some details about these bunkers, citing an unnamed KGB agent involved in their construction. Allegedly, these bunkers can house a population of 15,000 to 17,000 people. Equipped with an autonomous power plant, the bunkers boast a massive stockpile of food, water, fuel, and various supplies. They even had a bakery and a car workshop. Advanced air filtering and air conditioning systems were installed, along with a waste recycling setup. The bunkers also feature a communication post, a gym, and a small pool. According to the KGB agent's interview with Time, residents could potentially live in these bunkers for up to 30 years. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. The bunker network in the Remenki area extends to a deep underground command post that the world has never seen before. This post is linked to several others located in Moscow and its outskirts, including under the Kremlin, the Russian Armed Forces headquarters, and the Ministry of Defense. The connections are made through a secret metro line and a network of covert tunnels famously known as Metro 2. Anyway, as the Soviet Union crumbled, so did the upkeep of these bunkers. And that's all for today's video. But if you want to see more amazing content like this, click on one of the videos on your screen and I'll catch you there.